Hey guys, so today I'm gonna do my favorite standalones. So my favorite book standalones fiction, because some of my favorites are nonfiction, but today we're gonna just stick with fiction, and these are just my favorite standalone books. If I could put series books, I would, and there's some authors who are just amazing at series who I'd put towards the top of my list, but also these aren't all like the best books I've ever read. These are just books I thoroughly enjoyed and loved because like they were part of personal moments in my life, and just like you have to have the right emotion and the right time and the right everything for you to like truly love a book and it to like mean something and to change you a little bit. And so not just to enjoy a book, but books that make you think and make you change, they can make a world of difference. So let's get started.
Where to start. I don't even know how to put these in order of the top 10. I don't know how people do this, how they pick favorite books, because when you read hundreds of books and sometimes even 100 books in a year, you end up with a lot of books you really like or love.
I kind of want to do an honorable mention of my top 10. I know I said I only do 10, but I kind of want to do an honorable mention. So my honorable mention is Dark by Romeo Juliet. This book, I was in a major reading slump and I had seen it everywhere. Kind of got a boring cover, honestly, and I just picked it up out of the whim, and it was one of those books I read like that, and it got me out of my reading slump, so I absolutely loved it and recommended it to everybody, and I went on to read like the rest of Romeo Juliet stuff. So if I had to pick one Romeo Juliet, it'd definitely be Eleanor and Park, which tells this sweet little story about a young romance and about first loves and what happens when you leave first loves. And it's just about this girl who fills out a place, and she wears these headphones, and she has this bright hair, and then there's this guy who like is a little more into things in school and knows more popular kids, and he's into sports, and they kind of have rough home lives, and there's nothing super, it doesn't go super deep into anything too heavy by any means. It was still a really quick read, really fast read. I loved it. It's one of my favorite love stories I've ever read. I like it. I liked it so much. I like it when people have like just a really great personal connection like in that story. Okay, so let's get started with the 10. So the other book I read this year, so that's probably why it's making the list, is I read all of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books, and she is a phenomenal standalone writer. She's really good at making you fall in love with people really quickly and characters, because you only have this short amount of time in standalones. So standalones I feel like are really hard for people just like to be like, yes, that's it, that's my favorite book, or else you would just hug all the Harry Potters instead and say it's a standalone. But yeah, she's really good at it, and one that my favorite of hers was definitely Forever Interrupted. It made me bawl my eyes out, and I connected to the story. I read it in like one sitting, so you know it's going to be good if you read it in one sitting. I remember the characters so well, and it's just a wonderful story. It's really sad. It starts out with the funeral of her husband and a mother-in-law who doesn't know that it was her daughter-in-law. And then you start out with this more like divisive relationship between the mother-in-law and his wife, and then you learn more and more about what happened, why the mother-in-law didn't know. They get to know each other, they get to go through the healing process together, and deal with all the grief. And it was just a really powerful yet super romantic book, because you get to go back in time and read about all the romance, and it's like the best parts of romance because it was such a short-lived romance. You just absolutely loved it. I loved it. It is my #1 recommended read from her, and so that's another thing I had to do. I mean, there's some authors who could have booted off other people's list, but I just stuck to one book per author, so I had to do it. Okay, so the next book is an oldie but a goodie, and it is Water for Elephants by Sarah Gwynn. If you've seen the movie, you've probably liked it. It was like at the height of like what was his name? James Patterson, the guy that played in Twilight. Patterson, I don't really know. he starred in the movie, so it made it really big, and Reese Witherspoon, who I absolutely love and adore. So that also made it a really big movie. But before I read the book, and it's amazing, and the book is one of those ones you cannot put down. I get why it was popular. It was popular for years and years before the movie ever came out. but it is so good, and it starts with this like really cute story about an old man, and he's going back and talking about the time he ran away with the circus. And in the end, he runs away with the circus. It's adorable. It's cute. I absolutely loved it. But I had to pick Sarah Gwynn. I was hesitant to put this on my list because it's so old, and yeah, I still really love it. But at the same time, I've read her other books, and some of them are always like, yeah, it's okay. But for some reason, I can remember all the characters in all her other books and all the plot lines. Because usually if a book is like 3-star for me, I can't remember it. But for whatever reason, she's like one of the best character writers I've ever read. And I remember her characters so vividly. It's ridiculous. Absolutely love them. At all. So the next one is The Chemist by Stephenie Meyer. And Stephenie Meyer, of course, is one of the biggest known authors because of Twilight. And Twilight was huge. And everybody loved it. I read Twilight when not all the books were out yet. And I had to wait for a book. But I really liked it. And I knew it got a lot of flack afterwards in the movies and everything. Robert Pattinson. But she is a great writer at gripping you, and it was really good. So I read this one really recently, so that's why it's on the top of my mind. That's probably why it snuck its way in, but I absolutely loved it. It tells the story about a young girl who's a chemist, and hence the title of the story. But you start in this place where she's like scared to death for her life, and she's like fighting for her life, and she puts gas masks on, and she has all these tricks, and people are coming to kill her, and you have no idea why, which I think was one of the great things about Stephenie Meyer, is she's good at not dumping information. Like, you have to know a huge amount of the backstory in this book, and it's not just like dump. It's like really more organically given to you throughout the book, which I really love about her writing. Her writing also changed so much in this book. It used to be like always first person, and I think she did third person narrative, if I remember correctly, in this book. So her writing changed a lot. So if you didn't really like Twilight, you might like this as well. And I understand sometimes when the bigger names get on the shelves and they sit there a while, but at the same time, this one sat there forever and ever on like bestseller shelves, or every time I go to the airport, I'd see it. So I'm not surprised though. It was really, really good. I really loved it. It's one of my favorite reads I've read in a while this year, and it charted out the other books I've read a lot. But anyway, she goes in, she ends up meeting up with these two guys. One is an ex-Navy SEAL, one is a teacher. The teacher she actually had kidnapped as a part of this kind of government job, and she has targets on his back. The ex-Navy SEAL has targets on his back. So they kind of have to team up a little bit in this book. But I absolutely loved it. It's super fast-paced read, even though it's a thicker read. Sometimes books like these can take me a while, but I'll still really enjoy them. But I ran through this book really quickly, and that gives something to it, because it's a heavier, deeper read, but absolutely loved it. It's a thriller. I read it really quickly. I loved it. So next one is Pam Janoff's The Commandant's Girl. She does have quite a few that are series, not quite a few, but she has a few that are series. I can't recommend this author enough. I recommend her all the time. I always tell people to start with The Commandant's Girl, and if you're into historical or historical romance, you'll love her, I think. I absolutely love her. I've read everything she's put out. I think I own everything she's put out, which says something, because I really have to, even if I really love an author, I really have to love a book to still like go buy it and put it on my shelf and keep it. A lot of the books I buy I don't end up keeping because I don't want to take up space, But so Pam Janoff's The Commandant's Girl. This is about a girl who ends up working under a commandant, which is quite scary, but the book reads so quickly. Little bit of, not really romance, but she ends up making you somehow feel the slightest amount of warmth towards the commandant, which you shouldn't in a normal commandant book, which is amazing. It's amazing for an author to do that, I think. And it's really riveting. There is a book spin-off of this, but it like barely mentions, I don't even know if it mentions these people, but it's kind of a connection to it. So it's definitely a standalone. Absolutely love it. I love her writing. I had to put her on the list because she's one of my favorite all-time authors, and a lot of my favorite all-time authors don't do standalones, or just a standalone that I really, really love, but a lot of them don't do standalones. So I was so happy to put her on. Oh, these books are good, and they're not like heavy, like, oh, they're so meaningful. Historical reads that you can read really, really quickly. She's really good at gripping the story, carrying you through the story, and making you want to finish the story and figure out what's going on and what's happening, what happens with relationships. She's very, very, very good at that, where a lot of history stories kind of get bogged down with history. There's still a ton of history in them, but you'll love them just for the quicker reads. If you're into historical reading, but you want a lighter version, definitely try Pam Jonoff. Is Juliet by Anne Fortier. I've mentioned this book in so many different reads. I don't hear people talk about it. I know it's a bit of an older book, but I never really heard the hype around it and never heard people talk about it that much. So Sarah Wynn recommended it, but I absolutely love this. If you were a Romeo and Juliet or any kind of classics fans, Pride and Prejudice, you should definitely read this book. It is amazing. It delves into, there's something to be said about Romeo and Juliet. Like, I know it gets a lot of grief sometimes because people are like, they're 13 years old, it's ridiculous. But if you read the story, it'll make you cry. Like, it's insane how powerful writing can be sometimes. But this like delves into like all the history behind Romeo and Juliet, where the story originated from, where Shakespeare got it from. Yeah, it's got its own romance. It's definitely still fiction. You learn so much about Romeo and Juliet and so much history in Italy, and you feel like you're in Italy. It's a book that I could never ever forget. It's definitely one that would pick you out of a reading slump. So if you like romances at all, if you like historical romances, you even have, if you don't want to read Romeo and Juliet, I would still suggest reading. She's the newer one just because I absolutely loved this book, but since it's newer, I don't know how much it's impacted my life, but absolutely loved it. I read this at the beginning of the year. It is my favorite book of the year so far. We'll see if it ends up staying that way, but it's Kristen Hanna's Great Alone. I really liked this book. I love The Nightingale, but I still, for some reason, like this story more. Once I finally got the hard copy, I sat down and reread most of it because I had read it originally, I think online. I didn't listen to it. Yeah, so I'd read it online from like the library, but absolutely loved The Great Alone. And it's a story about the 70s, and there's a young mom and dad and little girl, and the dad is having a really rough time. He came out of Vietnam, and he has a lot of other evils going on, and he has alcoholism and PTSD. So they move to his old buddy who died in Vietnam's plot of land up in Alaska, and it's a really like the people that rough it in Alaska. There are certain sections of Alaska where they do, and it's just all about survival. It's like going back to the 1800s almost. Everything's about survival, and what you do in the summer prepares you for winter, and how much money you make, and all that stuff. And everybody leans on each other, so it is truly The Great Alone. You are alone a lot in this book. But it deals with all the evils of the family. The little girl grows up. There is a little bit of romance by a boy named Matthew I absolutely love, and his dad is really great too. It's a full story. It does span time from like 13 to like 20, mid-20s, I believe. So it does span a great amount of time as well, but it's just kind of a little epic family tale. Absolutely loved it. Couldn't put it down. Highly recommend it. Makes me want to go to Alaska and see the beautiful sights. Anyways, it's by the Kite Runners, Cadell Hassini, and it's 1,000 Splendid Suns. I thought this even more so. I really liked the Kite Runner, but I thought this one even more so. Like, I grew up in the middle of America, and even though everybody wasn't Christian around me, it was still very much Christian-based values and everything. So this worldview is a completely different worldview, and it really, where Kite Runner was kind of split-ish, this one really entrenches you into the society, and you learn about these two women. Oh my gosh, and it is so sad and so painful to see what they go through. But I feel like you learn so much from this book, and it is so well done. But yeah, it's a girl these girls are basically forced into marriage of this man, and he's not a great man. He's very abusive. He's very strict. He takes things out of the Quran that aren't, and twists them and uses them in not a great way. His wives end up in burqas. Anyway, this book is definitely eye-opening. If you have a difficulty like learning about those worlds or anything, this one is definitely eye-opening. It is such a great read. It's impactful. It's a story you'll never forget. And I mean, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I always tell people it's one of the favorite standalones. It's up there in my top 3 usually, so I can't believe I ever got it. And I had to run out and go get it for you guys. But just, it's amazing. It's incredible. It just, oh my gosh, you'll love these two women. But they've gone through so much, and it just reminds you in your life of like how truly like blessed and things are given to you, and just how much you really take for granted. It is one of those reminders, but it is a heavy book, which my personality type, I'm a really upbeat, happy person. So that's where most of these books are coming from. And I really like to be, and I don't like to feel very, very happy, but this is one of those like necessary reads. It's not like, oh, that's politically correct or whatever. It's just, it was a necessary read. Absolutely loved it. Loved it, loved it. Anyways, the next one I read as a little girl, and then I read it and a bit older, and I understood it a whole lot more. But it is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I've read this book so many times I can't count. I absolutely love this book, and it is my favorite standalone because it just means a lot to me, because I've read it so many times in my life and always learned something different from Elizabeth and Darcy. If you don't know the Pride and Prejudice story, Jane Austen wrote this as a bit of a satire to make fun of like wealthy people, like what could they want in life but to get married. And then there's these girls, this mother that has all these girls that are like basically on buffet, and it's hilarious, rewritten, and it's funny, and yeah, it's incredibly well done. And Darcy is a stubborn man, but at the same time, once he makes a decision, it's powerful and great and lovely. And at the time, I think I read this like the second time, I was like in the point of dating where like the guys were like really unsure of what they wanted, and they were always like, I don't know if I want to date or be serious or whatever. And I was like, where's Mr. Darcy? Like, I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. When I read this the second time, I was like, where's Mr. And I understood it so much more better the second time around. But yeah, love Elizabeth. And I can't tell you how many millions of times I've watched the movie, either like the Keira Knightley version or the other ones. I read every book about them. I love them. It's just ridiculous not to say it at this point. So I've put this in other romance favorite books before. Let's get over that. My next one, you heard me ranting and raving about it forever. It's The Man Called Ove by Frederick Backman. I read this one just simply because it's popularity, and it was just there, and it was just there, and the book didn't really entrance me, and it didn't really, like, it doesn't have romance in it, right? It starts out with a man wanting to kill himself, which is desperately sad. This book will make you cry, it'll make you laugh. If you have anybody stubborn in your life, it reminds me of so many people. The father figure in this book is incredibly well done. Whether your dad was stubborn or not, every person that I swear have read this is like, oh my gosh, that's my dad. And I'm like, we don't all have the same dads, guys. We don't. We don't. But the father figure in this was incredibly done. And especially when you consider this is a translated version. For the humor to come across, for the fatherly figure to come across, it's amazing. And he'll make you love him. And A Man Called Ove is just that. It's a man who's really, really sad. His wife has just died. He wants to go and join her, and he's older, he's retired, he's worked really hard his whole life, and then there's these men that come along who don't know like the handyman style that he grew up in, and he built this house and all this stuff. So all these people come along, disrupt his plans, and it really shows him like the need to be in other people's lives and people around him, and that they really need him. So the story is sad. It's cute, it's incredible, it's funny, it'll remind you of your father no matter what your father was like, apparently. It's amazing. It is so amazing though. And they're like, everybody I've given this book has really enjoyed it and is like, man, that's really good writing. Yeah, I mean, I gave it to my 68-year-old father. He loved it. He cried. My dad doesn't cry, and he cried, I think, a little bit when he read this book. So it's amazing. It's good. Definitely check it out. I wish I could write like this. No way I could ever get to that level though. Okay, so my number one, I just have to go with a romance. I am sorry, but I am a romantic at heart, and I love romance. I love it. I really, really do. And this is my favorite story probably I've ever read. And it just got Standalone. My favorite Standalone I've ever read. And it's just really, really good. But it is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I love this copy. I just got rid of my other copy, but this one's gold and it's beautiful. It's got those silky pages. And it's such a short story. It's so easy for anybody to read this book. And if Mr. Fitzgerald would like to come back and tell me what the heck happened, was he like drunk? I don't know. Was it all a dream? I don't really know. I don't know all the philosophies behind this book. I just know I love this book. I love Gatsby. Gatsby just needs a really warm hug and needs to be hidden from people. And Gatsby just goes through so much in his life, and it's like at the precipice moment, and you want him to get the stuff he wants, and then nothing. So yeah, if you don't know the story of Great Gatsby, you should, or just watch the movie. Oh my gosh, the movie was done incredibly well, I thought, as well. But it's so good. It's just about this guy, and he's like remembering back on a time when he met this man named Gatsby. He lived across the lane from him. Gatsby has these exorbitantly wealthy parties that are just huge, and it just, all of New York City is going to them, and they're having fun, they're having a blast, and there's tons and tons of money and chaos, and it's all behind Gatsby's doing it to get his love of his life back, basically. And he's worked his entire life towards this now. He worked his entire life to be somebody, and then he found a greater purpose, is to love somebody, and he's just been working his whole life for it. Anyways, it's sad. It's a love story. It's just, he's got it all in here. F. Scott Fitzgerald fit it all into, like, I don't know how many pages the original one was recorded at. 170 pages. And it's really powerful, and it adds sadness and addiction, and it has everything in it. It has all the complication life, characters you hate, people you don't get along with, the bad things in life you wish for, and gluttony and everything. Oh my goodness, it has it all. And he shoved it all into a little book and a little story, but it's powerful. So yeah, this is definitely my favorite standalone. If you can't tell, read The Great Gatsby. It's amazing. Some of the other books I may personally think have written better. Some of them made me laugh more, cry more, whatever. I hope you enjoyed books that were my standalones. And now these could change all the time, just depending on where I'm at and how I feel and what I really thought about a book, or things like that, or what I've read recently. As you saw, a few more recent reads have snuck in. This is not a complete list by any means. I could give you 100 top standalones, definitely. But we're gonna stick it to 12 or 10-ish. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and please subscribe below, hit the notification bell. Next time I upload, you'll know to upload. Hopefully you found some information or something you haven't read here. I know a lot of these books are really, really popular, but something maybe you missed, and they are all great, I promise you that. I would recommend all of these all the time to, like, almost anybody I meet. I would recommend these books. So they're universally recommended. Love them. And I will see you guys next time. See you guys next time. Bye.